Imagine a country sitting on more oil than Saudi Arabia, more than Russia, and more than the United States. A country that, by all rights, should be one of the richest nations on Earth. Yet today, its people are often seen in food lines. Its currency is nearly worthless. And its name appears again and again in global power struggles. So here's the real question. Why does the world care so much about Venezuelan oil? Why do the United States, China, Russia, and even Europe keep watching this one country so closely? Because Venezuelan oil is not just fuel, it's power. It's geopolitics. And it may just decide the future of the global energy war. To understand this, we first have to grasp the sheer scale of Venezuela's black gold empire. Venezuela holds the largest proven oil reserves in the world, over 300 billion barrels. Let that sink in for a moment. Most of this incredible wealth lies beneath the Orinoco Belt, a massive underground sea of crude stretching for hundreds of kilometers. In theory, this should make Venezuela unbelievably wealthy. Oil means money, influence, strategic importance, and global attention. And for decades, that was true. By the middle of the 20th century, Venezuela was one of the richest, most stable countries in Latin America, with a thriving middle class exporting oil mainly to its neighbor to the north, the United States. But oil, as we've learned, often comes with a dark side. It comes with a curse. This brings us to what economists call the resource curse. It's a paradox where a country with an abundance of natural resources, like oil, ends up with less economic growth and worse development outcomes than countries with fewer resources. When a country becomes too dependent on one resource, everything else suffers. In Venezuela's case, the nation gradually stopped investing in other vital sectors. Agriculture. Why bother when you can import food with oil money? Manufacturing. Technology. It was easier and faster to just buy them from abroad. Oil money paid for everything. As governments changed and corruption grew, the entire economy became dangerously addicted to one single thing: the price of a barrel of oil. Then, in Izozozo, Hugo Chavez rose to power. He saw oil not just as a commodity to be sold, but as a political weapon to be wielded. Chavez completely changed the game. He nationalized the oil industry, seizing control of the state oil company, PDVSA, and purging it of experienced technocrats. He used the massive influx of oil money to fund ambitious social programs, which won him huge support among the poor. But he also used oil to openly challenge the United States. He built alliances by providing cheap oil to friendly nations like Cuba. He forged new energy deals with China and strengthened military ties with Russia. For Chavez, oil became Venezuela's shield, a way to project power and defy American influence in Latin America. And you can be sure that Washington took notice. So, why does the United States care so much? For decades, Venezuela was a reliable and crucial oil supplier to the U.S. They were geographically close, and American refineries, particularly those on the Gulf Coast, were specially designed and configured to process Venezuela's specific type of heavy, sour crude. This wasn't a casual relationship. It was a deeply integrated energy partnership. When diplomatic relations collapsed under Chavez and his successor, Nicolas Maduro, everything changed. The U.S. imposed heavy sanctions, aiming to cut off the government's oil revenue. Venezuelan oil exports were severely restricted, and in combination with internal mismanagement, the country's oil production utterly collapsed. But here's the great irony. Even while sanctioning Venezuela, the U.S. still quietly needed its oil. Because replacing that specific type of heavy crude isn't easy or cheap. It requires retooling multi-billion-dollar refineries. That's why, whenever the global oil supply gets tight, say, during a war in Europe or a crisis in the Middle East, Washington suddenly starts talking about Venezuela again. The strategic need for its oil resurfaces, often overriding political disagreements. And while the West, led by the US, stepped back. Two other global powers saw a golden opportunity and stepped in: China and Russia. They became the silent winners in this geopolitical chess game. China, hungry for energy to fuel its economic machine, provided Venezuela with billions of dollars in loans. But these weren't just friendly loans. They were loans backed by oil. China secured long-term energy supplies at favorable prices, locking in a vital resource for its future. Russia, meanwhile, saw a different kind of opportunity. Moscow provided technical support to the struggling Venezuelan oil industry, invested in its aging infrastructure, and sold weapons to its military. For Russia, Venezuela became a key strategic foothold in the Western Hemisphere, a way to challenge American dominance in its own backyard and apply geopolitical pressure whenever needed. For both Moscow and Beijing, Venezuelan oil isn't just about energy, it's about leverage. It's a tool to reshape the global balance of power. The combination of crippling U.S. sanctions, chronic mismanagement, and rampant corruption created a perfect storm that caused Venezuela's oil production to crash. At its peak, the country was pumping out over 3 million barrels of oil per day. Today, it struggles to produce even a third of that amount. This collapse has had massive global shockwaves. In the interconnected world of oil markets, less supply from a major producer almost always means higher prices for everyone. Higher oil prices fuel inflation around the globe. And rising inflation can lead to economic hardship and political instability, even in countries thousands of miles away. So when Venezuelan oil goes offline, the entire world feels the ripple effects at the gas pump and in the grocery store. So, after all this collapse and chaos, why does Venezuelan oil still matter so much today? For a few crucial reasons. First, energy security. Despite the push for renewables, the world still runs on oil. It fuels our cars, planes, and ships, and it's a key component in everything from plastics to pharmaceuticals. As long as oil remains the lifeblood of the global economy, the country with the largest reserves will always be a critical player. Second, geopolitical balance. Who controls Venezuelan oil has a major say in the balance of power in the Americas. A Venezuela aligned with the West is a strategic asset for the USA. Venezuela aligned with China and Russia is a strategic threat. It's that simple. Third, Venezuela acts as a crisis backup supply. In a global emergency, another major war, a blockade of a key shipping lane, the world would need more oil, fast. With the right investment and political stability, Venezuela has the potential to quickly ramp up production and become a major supplier again, stabilizing volatile markets. And finally, the looming future of energy wars. As global competition for finite resources intensifies, vast untapped reserves like Venezuela's become priceless strategic assets. This brings us to the big question: who will ultimately control it? The ongoing struggle for Venezuela isn't just about democracy versus authoritarianism or capitalism versus socialism. It's a raw battle for power. It's about who controls the oil, who profits from it, and who gets to use it as a weapon on the world stage. Will Venezuela eventually repair its relationship with the West and become a key energy partner again? Will China and Russia deepen their grip, turning the country into a permanent strategic outpost? Or will Venezuela find a way to break the oil curse and finally rebuild its economy for the benefit of its own people? One thing is absolutely certain: Venezuelan oil will continue to shape global politics, energy markets, and international rivalries for decades to come. Oil built Venezuela. Oil broke Venezuela. And oil may yet decide its future. Because in a world fundamentally driven by energy, the country sitting on the largest proven oil reserves on the planet will never be ignored. Not by the United States, not by China, not by Russia, and not by history.